I think you very well.
Then we got one behind us. The one guy who was in the church. I don't know exactly his name. So, welcome everyone to the music session here at IETF 98. We have the notable that we recommend you read in case you did not. There are all kinds of important information there. For the trivia for this meeting, please sign in blue sheets. They're already out there. We have received help. We have Jonathan as JavaScribe, and we have note takers, Ronnie and Dan. You just went out, but hopefully coming back soon. When you speak during presentations, please use the microphone. We have one in the aisle, and state your name when you speak. And for the ones presenting, we have no square on the floor this time, but please use the microphone over here and stand by that one for Meetekau to make yourself seen. We also have a general document review request. We have a number of documents closing in to be complete, but we need more reviews in general, and the quality of the documents will be improved the more reviews we can get. And you will also ensure that you get your own documents reviewed if you offer to review others. Thank you. This is the current agenda. as proposed for today. We have this introduction and the status updates by the chairs. We have negotiating SRTP and RTCP feedback, the opportunistic RTP. We have ICE STP open, ICE SIP STP open issues. 15 minutes. We have again discussion on bundle with 2 different presentations, both Christer and Colin. We have a few minutes on the unsupported restrictions in RID answers presented by Adam, and we have handling of unverified data and media. And if there's time, we have also Martin talking about unknown key shares. Is there any proposed changes or additions to the agenda?
Christian, no, just to mention, as I also informed you, that draft IETF 9572 update has already been published as an RFC. Thank you.
That is correct. It is already published.
Just 2 notes on the agenda. Adam is not here right now. He's in regex right now, so that may change a little bit. So everybody should be prepared that Adam may not show up, or whenever he shows up, we'll just see if we can find time for him. Second part is on bundle. We really want this done. All right, so let's try to get through it this time and just close whatever issues we have. Suhas.
Suhas, I had a comment. I need to have Adam in the room when I present. So it's because we're talking about his issues.
Okay.
So if we can push bundle before mine so that Adam comes in.
If you, yeah, I mean, if you want to go after bundle, be my guest,
Sure. But I need Adam to make a decision. So.
Sure. And without further ado, I see we have our former AD in the room. So we just wanted to take a few moments to say thank you very much for your services, and wish you all the best in your future new role. And we have a little something for you. We were quite, a little disappointed to hear that rock apparently is not your thing. So that limited the choices a little bit. So it came down to a choice between hip hop and Dave Brubeck, and I hope we made the right choice. So hopefully,
thank you. I don't know where this rumor started about cosmic rock. I should, but it's not true. Don't want to leave anyone's wrong impression. Thank you. I'm really touched. I have a giant record collection prepared to at the beginning of the week. And it's like really touching and thoughtful. So many thanks, and hope you'll be around on the IETF. So reviewing your document. I just got to seminar this morning, and I thought specifically a music document. No idea. But in the future, so thank you.
So with those proposed changes to the agenda, that we shift the ICE SIP STP open issues a bit later such that Adam can be in the room, can we agree on the agenda for today? Okay, so let's proceed. Then we go to I'm Alan Johnson, and I'm going to present. No? No? How about if I turn it on?
There we go. Okay, we got something now. So I'm Alan Johnson, and I'll be presenting on basically negotiating SRTP and RTCP feedback opportunistically. And I'm presenting this draft on behalf of Bernard, Andy, Roland, and Gonzalo. So this is not a new idea or new work. So hopefully this is not new to you. And in theory, we don't need this because SDP, you can negotiate all these things, but it ends up being very, very complicated. And the approaches that we've developed over the years have not been adopted in the industry. Instead, an opportunistic approach is the one that has been adopted. And the idea behind this is that you just use an AVP profile and you basically negotiate things like security and RTCP feedback using the presence of attributes. That's really the basic idea behind it. It goes all the way back to the draft Kaplan on best effort, SRTP, as we called it way back then. It's since been incorporated into the IMTC's security recommendations, and it is pretty widely used and interoperable in the industry today. So our goal here is really just to standardize what's out there. Yeah, next slide. So we've been discussing this in the SIP Brandy working group, and we have a draft on opportunistic SRTP. However, SIP Brandy does not make normative documents, and there's a couple of musts and things that we need to fix. So that's why we're back here in MMUSIC. But this work is basically hand in glove with the work that's being done in SIP Brandy. Next. So again, just the review from SIP Brandy that opportunistic security, some protection most of the time. So you try to encrypt. If you can, great. If you can encrypt, but you don't get authentication, you still do it because some security is better than none. That's the basic principle. And of course, this is not a substitute for fully authenticated and encrypted communication. Okay, so things like WebRTC and hopefully everything that we roll out in the future will never use opportunistic approaches, because it's much better if everybody is expecting to use authenticated encryption, and you want to fail it. If the other side you're expecting to doesn't support it, you really want to fail that call. Okay, but this opportunistic approach, it's for the transition, for all the deployed systems out there that don't do encryption, and how to get from zero to somewhere. That's really what this is all about. So this is not a substitute for any of the other things. Okay. Okay. So actually, I think the draft itself is shorter than these slides. It's really only one page, and basically it updates a couple of things. One is RFC 4569, and that allows us to use SDP security descriptions with an AVP profile. Right now it says you must use SAVP, and to do it opportunistically, we have to use it with AVP. So we're basically relaxing that. And the other change is 4585, which says that if we're doing RTCP feedback, that we have to use the AVPF profile. And again, we just want to use the AVP profile and negotiate the feedback based on the SDP parameter. So that's really all it is. It's just changing those two musts. And as I said, it's really a very, very short draft. It's not a new idea. Hopefully it's not controversial. And we're kind of here because of the whole procedural things with the working groups. Yeah, right.
Ronnie, what's the reason to do the RTCP-FB in the AVP, for AVP? Why not do AVPF if you want RTCP-FB?
Right, you don't know if the other side supports AVPF,
Yeah,
and if you do an offer with AVPF and they don't understand it, then the call fails.
Do you want to do I'm wondering if you want to do a call, and if you wanted to do RTCP feedback, if you want the AVPF profile, if you want to do really a call on AVP. I mean, it's a different.
I mean, I think the idea is that you want to use AVPF if the other side supports it, but if he doesn't, you're willing to fall back to AVP and do something. Yeah, I think that's the goal.
That's the whole nature of
That's the goal. I mean,
opportunistic. If the other guy supports it, you use it. If he doesn't, you're willing to continue with the session without it. Otherwise, don't use it opportunistically. If you must have it, then don't use this. Just like if you must have encrypted, authenticated media, then don't use opportunistic
So
security.
in the slide, you don't mention the possibility of opportunistic DTLS SRTP. Are you looking at that also?
Our opportunistic security does describe how you can do it with
So
DTLS.
you-
It's just there's no musts that we have to override in there.
Oh, the DTLS SRTP?
Correct.
I mean, the same procedure would apply, though. I mean, you would offer either AVP or maybe
Exactly. Yeah.
maybe security descriptions, but also add NA equals fingerprint.
Correct.
So
And
you
that's in the opportunistic security document in SIP Brandy.
Okay, so
But that doesn't violate any musts in any of the existing specs.
Okay, I mean, it might still be worth mentioning it in this document, though, just sort of.
Well,
yes, you don't violate musts, but
This
sort of
document
give-
mentions it. It does
okay.
mention it. Yeah.
And do updated offer answers converge on the real profile?
No. You just leave it.
Why? Is that for the sake of mailboxes or just?
Just for and for you don't want to have failures because
I guess.
Mosinati, I think this is good to do because systems are already doing this. A lot of vendors are already doing this. And as a matter of fact, there's vendor interoperability forums that already specify this.
Yep.
So it's good for the IETF to recognize what the implementations are actually doing and make the standards align with the industry best practices.
Yep. Thanks.
Totally support this document. As you know, I did 10 years ago. No, it's been a good idea for at least 10 years. And I like that this is the minimal possible thing you could possibly, this document is just like don't expand its scope to talk about more. I love that it is what it is. Get it done.
Yep.
Chris, I support this.
We have one remote participant.
Okay.
And Randall Jessup, Mozilla. I'll just pile on because I was in line to say the same thing that Colin was saying. Been using it for years, or was.
Hi, relaying for Roman. Sorry, Roman, I was in line when you made that. You cannot change profile in the answers. It will result in different transport and offer answer, and I support the document. Yeah, I realized about the answer. I was just wondering about subsequent offers is what I was wondering about.
Yeah.
Yes, it doesn't
No.
matter either.
We discussed in WebRTC the issue of what to do in the subsequent offers, like to death, and came to the conclusion that it was best not to change things, to just leave them the same as they were before, and it's sort of a toss-up. So.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, show of hands. How many people read this document? All right. Can we go for a hum for adoption? Subject to AD approval, of course, subsequently, if there's significant interest. We'll ask first people to hum if they are in favor, and then subsequently those that are not. Ben, do you have anything you want to say first? Okay. All right. Those of you in favor, please hum now. Those of you opposed, please hum now. All right, for the note taker. Okay, for the note taker, there seems to be a strong consensus in the room for adoption.
Okay, thank you.
So we will coordinate with the AD.
And confirm on the list.
The AD is highly likely to approve.
Given the shift, we then have bundle.
Yeah, this is no fake news. We're still working on this. There are a few issues, and I don't think I'm not going to need much time on this. The first thing has already been discussed on the list, and nobody objected there. And so I think if someone has an issue now, he or she really needs to say why he didn't bring it up earlier. Then there's another thing which I'm going to mention here, but we have a separate presentation from Cullen about that. An editorial issue that we need to finalize, and then there is another, mostly editorial, well, not really editorial, but issue that we also need to do. But there are no really open issues. There's just works that needs to be done. So next slide, please. This is one thing which came up pretty late. I think it was raised by Ecker, and basically what the draft says today, or what the spec says today, is as we know, the different STP attributes, they have different categories. I'm not going to go into that now, assuming that there are two types which are transport and identical. and which means that if you use those within bundle, you're only going to put those in one of the M lines which is associated with the bundle group, because they apply to every other M line too. Now the problem is that some of these attributes are RTP specific. I have an example, and this may be the only one, RTCP max only. I don't know if this feedback that we just heard about is also, but at least the two. And I think the assumption has always been that you only use this with RTP M lines. But then if you're creating your bundle group and you just, if you want to start, for example, with the data channel, what you're going to do then, the data channel is actually going to be the M line of the data channel is going to be the one that defines the properties, the IP address 5-tuple for the bundle group. So the proposal was that we should just, next slide, please. So basically, we have two alternatives. As we have today, is that we mandate that the tagged M line, basically with tagged M line, I mean the M line that represents the bundle group when it comes to port and IP address, so on. That has to be RTP, or as was suggested, we allow these RTP attributes also in non-RTPm lines. I say RTP attributes here, but it could be a little more generic media attributes.
So, Martin Thompson, the reverse is opposite as well. If there are attributes that would only be used for an application line, those would have to be on an RTP line if the RTP line was first, right? I'm not aware of any.
Well, I think
nor am I aware of any that would cause this to be really difficult, which is those that have the same name but different semantics in RTP and not. So,
yeah, we have to remember this only applies to because I mean we have, for example, for the data channel we have SCTP specific attributes, the SCTP port, but they don't apply to the other ones. So you will add those whenever you add your SCTPM lines. I mean, these are the only ones, but like I said, we need to make the text generic enough so it covers.
So I mean, I think I was going to say the same point as Martin, and then a bit about point two. But regardless if there are any today or not today that only apply to data, there certainly could be ones defined in the future that only apply to data. Mm-hmm. So I think that the solution number one here doesn't really work very well. Because you just end up with the problem in the reverse thing. Yeah. However, solution two I think works fine, and it is slightly weird to have an attribute which makes no sense for a data M line sitting in a data line, but the very definition of SDP is unknown attributes have to be ignored anyway. So that just becomes an unknown attribute from respect to the data line, and it ignores it. So I think that solution two, I just don't really see real problems with it. And
sure,
besides,
if you go to next slide, it's actually that's what I'm suggesting. Yeah.
So having written the SDP examples draft, I'm seeing how much of putting the identical and category attributes, identical and transport attributes to the M line that corresponds to the tag, the bundle, and amount of SDP that gets reduced towards the end. Yeah, I'm totally fine with having this bit of ugliness, which is not bad. It's the support option too.
John, thanks. I mean, my only concern would be if there's implementations out there which don't know bundle, no A equals RTCP only, no it's defined as must only appear in an RTPM line, and they see it in a non-RTPM line, they barf. But given that none of those things are going to probably know anything about a SCTP data channel either, they're hopefully just going to look at that, say, I've never heard of this, I don't care what the attributes mean, and reject.
I mean, yeah. I mean, I think in general, I think we can expect issues when you have one endpoint offering bundle and the other one doesn't. There may be implementations which are strict or doesn't really follow the rules, but I think that's gonna go away. So
Martin Thompson, I've had experience, particularly in TLS, of implementations that are supposed to ignore things but don't. So Jonathan's right. It's a risk. We just note the risk and accept the fact that the alternatives were all much worse than this one.
I think we have a similar issue now. For example, because now we allow multiple fingerprint attributes. For example, there may be implementation that's going to bark with those because they expect one, but I mean it will be fixed by time. So I think the big question, I mean, unless someone really objects to this, the alternative two is the way to go. But the question is really, how and where to document this. The way I was thinking about it is to have in bundle. I'm not sure, maybe you have some ideas, but the way I was thinking, have it in a bundle where we talk about a section which we call media specific attribute consideration, so something like that, and then we add some text. I don't think we need to write too much, but just so people are aware that this can happen. But so I don't have any text here now, so there's no link to any PR or anything, because I wanted to make sure people are okay with this first. But my idea would put it in bundle. I don't think we need to start updating RFCs, defining, you know, their max attributes and all that stuff. We put it in one place, and that's it. So, please like to get it in minutes.
Yeah, I don't think so. I mean, I hear alternative too, right? I mean, everybody's in favor of that. I don't hear anybody against it. So for the note taker, I think that's what we're doing. I do think Martin made an important, observation that there is risk with this, right? So we should note that risk. I think that's worthwhile pointing out as well. But microphone, please.
I think the other action was to have a new section in the bundle draft.
Right. Yeah. We'll put it in the bundle draft for the note taker as well.
Just to be clear, I think the risk is actually pretty small, because this whole scenario only exists if you start with like for the WebRTC, for example, with a data channel, and then you try to add audio or video later, right?
Yeah.
Because otherwise, in the normal, if you start with audio video, the data channel needs to be at the bottom anyway.
Exactly, and that was more or less the
that
assumption we previously made. Yeah, you will always start with an RTP anyway, so it doesn't matter. But I mean, now we will allow people, if they for whatever reason want to start with a data channel too. So.
But at the point when you start with the data channel, so then the problem only arises basically in the renegotiation. At that point, you know if the other side supports bundle or not. So that's why I think the risk is actually pretty low.
Yeah. Okay, so if that's it, then next slide. Oh, sorry. I will start working on a pull request. I mean, anyone who wants can do it, of course, but we need a section somewhere in bundle which talks about this. But whoever, me or anyone else, as soon as you have some text, pull request or whatever format, please send it to the list so we can look at it. Because as next slide will show, it can take a very long time sometimes to agree on text. This is an issue that's been going on for quite a while. We had text in bundle previously, and we had text in JSAP. We made a decision that the text from JSAP is going to be removed and put into bundles. That decision was basically done, I think we've done it on the list, but it was formally done yesterday at RTC Web. It's basically, it has different name. I think in JSAP and Cullen talk about DMAX, but it's basically when you have these multiplexed RTP packages and you receive them, how do you take them and make sure that you associate them with the correct M line? And then from there, if you have JSAP, it's going to go to the RTP receivers and so on. I think people mostly agree I mean, this is not really rocket science. This is something that everyone implementing has to do. But so I think it's been mostly editorial. I mean, and how we're going to write this and in which order things are done. So there's been a very long email discussion about that. But like I said, Cullen is going to talk about this in just a while. I just wanted to mention that this is one of the issues. So next slide, please. This is another one which came up a while ago, and it's been going on for a while. The thing was that, okay, I forgot to put the RFC number here, but there's basically an RFC that mandating that these STS items have to or must be encrypted. It was raised by some people, I think it's Aker or Cullen or someone who said, no, we shouldn't really mandate this because people don't implement this is overhead and so on and so on. So we say, okay, but basically in order to get this through the security reviews and all that stuff, we need to justify then, okay, why in the case of this which is the item that we define in bundle, why don't the encryption requirements apply here? There's been the discussions. Magnus has, thank you very much to him, he has put together some text. You can now find it in a pull request. There's been a lot of discussion about that, I hope. One of the guys that had issue was Ecker. He has now indicated that he's okay with the text that we have. So I encourage anyone else who may have an opinion on this, go and look at this, or otherwise I'll just, merge the pull request very, very soon and submit a new version of the document. I think that's all I had to say. Yeah, just this. And then there's been some comments. I think, bundles have been going on for a while, but I think one of the good things is that now we have people actually implementing, so we actually get some implementation feedback. For example, Taylor has had a lot of, I think, useful input, editorial suggestions. At one point, I think we said that no, we're not going to do any more editorial changes, but I think some of the stuff that he has done is actually very good. So I do intend to look at that. Ecker also had some comments. For example, he wanted to get rid of this shared address terminology and so on. I've been looking into that, and I don't really know how I can fix that, so maybe I won't. But at least I will look at this stuff that Taylor has suggested. It makes it more readable, and it also aligns a little more with JSEP and other specifications. So I think it's good. But that's basically the last thing I'm going to do. I want to get these other ones fixed first. So thank you.
So, Christer, as you said, this document has been worked on for quite a while. So what is missing at this point? I mean, can we get a timeline? Because, I mean, from the chair's point of view, we want to move this forward. And I take it that the working group want this document to move forward as well. So what do we need to do?
Assuming no one has any issues with the two previous issues and the one Colin's going to talk about, I will merge the pull requests, next week, or if you want to give people some time, but as soon as that's good, and I will submit a new version. People can comment that, and then I will start looking into these Taylor's comments and Ecker's comments, and I maybe spend a week or two or three to look into that, and then we have one more version, and then I think that's it.
But these are only editorial comments, right? There's no substantial comments?
Yeah, I mean, Taylor had some, I think he had some more functional, but I said, no, it's too late. I mean, there were quite fundamental changes, so I said, no. I mean, if he wants to do that, then he has to raise it to the list, and we need to discuss it here, but okay. I don't think, but. Yeah.
Nadia, are you lumping the issue of the uniqueness of the XMAP parameter for mid in that as editorial?
I think
that's probably not editorial, but I think it's important that something that should be slipped into bundle.
Yeah, there is an ongoing discussion on the mailing list now, but I haven't had time to read the latest email, so I can't really say much about that.
I think there's not much dissent, so I think it's something we could probably close quickly, and if you're willing to pull it in, I'm sure one of the people would be able to provide you a pull request for the text.
Okay, good.
Be good to get in before.
I did respond to that on the mailing list, because the ext map is special category. So whoever defines new ext map should define how it is used in their context, especially so bundle defines new mid ext map. So that should say something about how the IDs should be unique across all the bundled M lines.
Okay.
That's the only.
Okay.
John, thanks. I mean, I think it sounded like you said that the definition of the individual header extensions have to define how it's used. I don't think that A makes sense or B is what we're talking about. I think the question, at least as I understood the mailing list, is the mapping between, how does the mapping between IDs and XMAP URIs apply across M lines? And I think, I mean, the wording here, it doesn't exactly, basically it has to be, non-contradictory. I mean, you don't have to use a given header extension on every M line. I mean, unless an M line says it does. I mean, there could be transport level things, in which case, yes, maybe in that sense, you have to define it. But at the XMAP, for XMAP proper, I'd say, you can't have 3 mean mid on one M line and, audio levels on another M line. That's just not going to work. But you could have say that, okay, well, the audio M line has audio levels and the video M line doesn't have audio levels, because that makes sense.
So I think my suggestion was it depends on the extension that we are defining.
Mm-hmm.
Mid is different, audio level is different, and video level is different. So Taylor's issue was, should the ID, or Inaki or Taylor, whoever that is, should the ID be common across all, or should it be repeated? Like, what's the category that you would want to assign to the ID that you use? So the way JSON does is that you define ID, and it's within a bundle, it's unique, that ID for that particular identifier that you're defining. The same way, same rules apply. I think we need to just bring that in some form of text in bundle. The way JSON, even it does not say that's how JSON writes the examples today.
Okay.
So I can point to the example text in JSON.
Are you willing to provide a PR?
I can start
on bundle?
something.
Okay.
Yeah, I can start something.
Yeah.
Mosinati, I think there's one simple, non-controversial thing that everyone would already agree to, and is probably a critical thing to get in bundle, and it really impacts the Appendix B stuff on RTP demux, and that's to make sure that the mid header extension XMAP value is the same. That's the first fundamental point, and I don't think there's any dissent on making sure the bundle that says that. What Jonathan was raising is a more broad issue about how should the other XMAP IDs be specified in bundle. Should bundle say that the XMAP IDs should have some kind of uniqueness or commonality for all the other ones, for video rotation or, center timestamps or things like that. And for that, I think there's less clear consensus on what should be done, but it probably makes sense to look at the payload type situation, because they're both really just indices into some body of SDP, right? There's just a number, a value that has no real meaning outside of a linkage to some external thing outside of RTP, which would be SDP in this case. So they're just hooks they're just identifiers for things that have relevance in SDP. And looking at the payload type rules is probably a good example of what they should be for XMAP.
Yeah, Colin, James, totally agree. And I think all we need to say is, like, you shouldn't use the same number to mean two different things, even though you might be able to get that to work if we really wrote a lot of text and, cranked our foot around backwards. Like, it's just stupid. Don't do it. Like, we're not running out of numbers in this space so quickly. So. No, it dynamically expands to be as large as you need it for all intents and purposes. So, yeah. So. They're just 1 byte always. You can go to 2 bytes, right?
But it's only 255 pages.
That means 255 simultaneous.
No, but that's
Yeah. Okay. Right. So I just don't think it's worth optimizing. Yeah.
No, it's 1 byte.
Yeah, okay. So there's a lot of discussion saying this. It's just, I think Magnus has suggested that it's 1 byte and 255 different header extensions that you're using concurrently. You're starting to risk having nothing but extensions in your packets at that point, right?
Yeah, so Magnus Presslund. Yeah, so it's 255 simultaneously configured header extensions in one RTP session. Yeah, yes, but it's plenty, yes.
All right. So from a timeline point of view, so 4 weeks from today, I think it's April 27th. Would that be reasonable to say we have a new version by then that addresses the editorial comments and the outcomes of the discussions here today, so we can try to move forward at that point?
I mean, the outcome of the discussions here today is as soon as people are okay with the text in the pull request. I think it's good to get out a new version with that change, and then we start looking at these tailors.
I think we're handling GitHub here slightly the wrong way. Okay, it's not when they're okay with the pull request. We can agree right here. We're okay on a principle of how we're going to solve this problem, right? And then the editor can make sure the text is close enough that it'll be fine. We can merge it. We don't have to wait for the next meeting to approve the PR to put into the draft. Let's just. do we agree on the concept here, and we can leave the rest to whoever writes the PR to get the words correct?
So Martin Thompson, I think the right model to operate in here is assume that the editor controls the document and we give them instructions and they go and execute on that. And they can help us help them by doing things like put the PR on the mailing list so that people can comment. But ultimately, Krista, it's your responsibility to look after this document. We trust you. Go and do that for us, please.
And we are in consensus of the instructions we're doing right now.
Right. We have consensus on the instructions. If you get it wrong, we'll let you know. And hopefully what will happen is that we'll have a new draft in a relatively short amount of time. Chairs can call working group last call on it, and we can all read it and tell you that it's okay.
So a version that also addresses all the editorial comments, when do you think you'll have that?
I need to look at the tailors. I mean, it's not just, you know, but I agree. We can merge the pull request, and even when submit the new version, even after that, if people find some issues, I mean, we seem to agree on the approach right here. So the thing I wanted to avoid was to you know, merge the pull request, submit a new version, and then someone comes and say, no, I don't want this at all. But I think we have agreed on the approach. We're moving the text, Appendix B text. We're tweaking it a little. There were some issues with, you know, the bias SRC. So there may be some, but we agree on the approach. And I think that's enough for submitting a new version. And then people have a new version to read.
So Krista, I would encourage you to put the pull request when you've done it on the list and give people a couple of days to have a look at it. If you're concerned that it's big, or you
I mean, the pull request, I think Colin is going to show the link to the pull request is already there. So
then, you know, if people have had a look at the pull request, if you haven't had a look at the pull request, please do so now.
And we will get the other one very soon. But for the Appendix B, that pull request is already there, and then the mid security, that pull request is already there. And Necker, who had the biggest issue, said he's okay with it. So
I just had a look at the mid security one. It looks fine.
Okay.
So Krista, what I would like to see happen from a chair point of view, right, is that we try to get this document closed and we get it moving forward, because every time we leave it, right, something else shows up, right? Somebody else all of a sudden has a bunch of comments on it, right? You're the one that takes the brunt, right, of all of the work that goes into it after that. So really want to try to focus on, I mean, let's get everything, you know, in an update. You know, you can do, you know, the pull request update, that's fine, right? But try to focus on, let's get a version together that we believe is done at this point, and let's get this thing moving forward, right? Let's get it out of here. It's been going on for, you know, way too long, and I think most people would agree with that, right? It's time to move forward.
Yeah, and I think we have approached the state when, you know, someone reads it, you know, you can always find something, but then we're gonna fix, and we at the end of the day, it's just gonna be a mess. You know, you can fix it forever. So.
Exactly. All right. If you can get back to us, you know, you want to take a little bit more of a look at the editorial comments, you know, get back to us with a date for when you think you can have an update ready with everything. And I mean, if you want to merge the pull request in and send out a new update before that, that's fine too, of course.
Because now we have a new version of JSEP where Appendix B is removed. So that's why I think it's good to get a new version of bundle as soon as possible. So we have the text in an official document. No, it only exists in a private GitHub repo. So
Totally agree. Just trying to drive, you know, all the outstanding issues to conclusion, right? And let's just get a document, right, so we can move forward. Doesn't mean we can't have any incremental steps, but let's try to focus on, you know, moving this one.
So, Colin, do you want to take your presentation?
Yes. So I think that previous slide was fake news. He didn't actually say, why is this so hard? He said, who thought SDP could be so complicated? Next slide. Okay, so we have had a huge amount of back and forth on this. We've ended up with different proposals. We have, you know, disintegrated those different proposals and sliced them, diced them up into each independent part, then had a long GitHub thread on each one of those. We've tried to drag everyone in who cares. And the net conclusion is no one loves this text. But I think we're at the point that everyone believes that it's technically correct and can live with this text, which is the best we're going to get. And this really represents a merger of stuff that Peter Thatcher and some others mostly wrote was merged with a bunch of text that Magnus, I think, largely wrote. Are there maybe Magnus and Colin and others? I'm not even sure, but there's a lot of back and forth and merging. So let me explain what we get to. Next slide, please. So in a minute, we have the one large chunk, which is Appendix B in the JSOP draft. It went to working group last call over there a couple times, and there's a couple comments that have come up that are not fixed in it, that I think we have good solutions that are going to be acceptable to people here today. So I want to check that we have those two things that have come up as post comments, so they're okay with people. So one of them is about the what happens when you get a buy. How does this SSRC get removed out of the table? And RTP actually has very strong language on this already that says you can't really remove it right away. You've got to wait a little bit because there might be some out of order or some delayed packets, and then you can remove it. So I think that we don't want to change RTP in any way here. It's just fine what it is, and that's, we have a PR that basically says you do what RTP says you should do about this, which is delay a little bit before removing this. Anyone have problems with this solution? Okay, next slide then. Oh, just a minute, there's someone going to the mic over there. There's Colin. Let's go back a slide and let Colin in.
Hi, can you hear me? Hi, is this working? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, good. First of all, I'd just like to apologize for not having time to participate in the mailing list discussion on this as much as I would have liked to for over the past couple of months. Regarding this issue, I mean, I think obviously doing what RFC 3550 does is the right thing to do here. I think the reason this sort of thing is coming up, I think, is perhaps a sign that the text is perhaps not pitched at the right level. It seems to talk about routing RTP packets rather than processing, rather than changing the disposition of the RTP streams. And I think this is something Magnus has raised on the list a couple of times. So I think this proposal is the right thing to do, but I think we potentially need to work on the text to phrase it in a way such that we end up with something that isn't contradictory with 3550.
I mean, do you think this text that we have right now is contradictory with 3550?
Yes, in places.
So look, we took a scheme of writing it very much in the style that many of the RTP documents were written in, and we took a scheme that is very much in the writing it in the in a fairly prescriptive sort of sense that I would say that maybe the WebRTC documents are written in.
Yeah.
And I mean, I definitely understand that you and Magnus have a strong preference for that, but we had like a call out on the mailing list where we had like, I don't know, a large number of people making it very clear that they didn't want that style of text. They wanted the very prescriptive style of text.
So I'm not arguing against the prescriptive style of text. I think that is appropriate given this audience. However, I think the text as it is written has problems and contradicts what's in 3550 in some places. So I think we need to resolve those problems.
How soon can you identify those problems on the list? Where it contradicts. I'm not worried about the stylistic. The stylistic things. I'm beyond caring. But on the, if there's contradictions in it, I'm glad to fix those. I think they should be fixed. But or mistakes.
I mean, if a new draft is submitted, I can take a look at the revision and send comments within a week of that being submitted.
Okay.
But I do think there are some significant problems with the text as written, and I understand the style, the very prescriptive style is required, but I think what is being prescribed isn't compatible, and this minor issue is one example that's coming up as a result of that.
Okay, so are you all right with us putting this current text we're proposing into the draft and then and resubmitting that draft, and then and then it'll obviously still be open for comments on it?
Yes, I think that would be much better, because that way we all see the final version and know what we're working on.
Yeah, okay, fair enough, I understand. I think there might be somebody else in the queue. Yep, Peter.
We can't
Peter,
hear you,
go ahead.
Peter.
Can you hear me?
Please go ahead.
Yes, we
Okay,
can.
I just wanted to point out that this pull request was already merged into JSEP. So it's not a pending fix, it's already merged and fixed. And so is the second minor issue on the next slide.
I think what I was commenting on, I think when I said merged, I was referring merged into, we're going to merge it into the bundle draft, hopefully at the end of this meeting, and hopefully republish a new version of bundle at the end of this meeting.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, next slide, please. So the other issue that got raised was PTDMUX limitation of that. The way this text currently works, and people wanted to clarify this, we had clarifications of this, is, you know, if you don't know anything about where which inline the SSRC goes to, one of the things you might use in some cases is the PT to decide where to go. But once that happens, that SSRC latches to that inline, and if you can't use the PT to move things around from one inline to another inline, okay? I think that was how the algorithm has worked for a very long time. It was just we put in some text to explicitly say that out and make it clear. So that's this alternative, this other PR that is discussed. Next slide, please. So those two changes I just discussed, plus all of the text that was in the the version of JSEP in Appendix B that got working group last call to another working group. We have, Peter and Taylor put all of that in one PR that is against bundle and ready to merge. So, our proposal of a plan coming out of this meeting is, step one, go and merge that and publish a new version of bundle. Next slide. Step two, remove it from JSEP, except I did that last night, so it's already gone in the -20 version of JSEP, so this one's done. And then step three, we're done. Well, no, that's just, yeah. I mean, obviously, we now have a draft that will get commented on like all other drafts, and we can find any mistakes in it. But, that's what I'd like to see happen next, as long as people feel reasonably good with that PR, which I think modulo Colin's comments, which we're going to review once we have that merged in and out, that's pretty much where they are. So any objections to us going and doing this as our next 3 steps, or next 1 step? Okay, Krister, it's all on you.
Maybe just one question from the chair's point of view again. In the interest of driving forward progress, do you guys need any kind of, process enforcement to make sure that forward progress is made in a timely manner? Is that not an issue, or?
Well, I mean, progress in a timely manner is obviously an issue here, but I think that Colin's request for a week to review this after we get a version draft is very reasonable.
Absolutely.
And so why don't we see what the review is there, and then issue GitHub issues for that and track them down. If we can't resolve those in a short, maybe another week or so on the list, then maybe we should arrange a phone call or interim or something to try and resolve them if we're not making resolution on them, or some sort of consensus call on the list or something. I don't. We may need some way of really resolving those at some point, but let's take a stab at see how far we can get before we need any process involved. Does that work?
Okay, sure. So Martin Thompson, I was going to suggest that since Krister's got a number of editorial issues to sort out, you sort those out, and then you go directly to working group last call and treat it. Give Colin 2 weeks to do his checking over of the draft, and treat those like working group last call comments if any of those come in, and then fix them after the working group last call. And that means that there's a line in the sand then that says we're done with this, and it's really we're really only looking for bug fixes. And obviously, Colin believes we're going to find some bugs there, and we should just fix them.
But that makes sense. I like if we took the PRs that we've discussed in the meeting today, merged all of those, and released a version of that draft. Like, we're still missing the editorial comments that were there, but I would just treat those as early working group last call comments.
Yep. Yeah, so there's something else that Krister has identified. Throw it on the pile of the working group last call comments. Make the working group last call 3 weeks if you want. It's a pretty big document. Give people a bit of time, but that could start today.
Ronnie Evans, so you means that the call-in comments will be just during the working group last call? Because if they're after, you'll need the second day working group last call, because he said they are technical.
Bundle is destined for more than one working group last call, no matter what we do here.
Well, we've certainly had, well, Chris has had his fair share of working group last calls on this document. Maybe this is something that we need to discuss further. I mean, personally, I'm not a big fan of just, keep reissuing these working group last calls because they're losing their meaning. So I would prefer that we actually have a solid document in place that includes the editorial updates before we go through with that, so people actually take it seriously. But we can talk more offline.
That's fine.
Yes. So, still, Krista, we'll wait to hear back from you as to when you think you can have those editorials in. I still think it makes sense to get those pull requests in and just get, a version out so people can look at that. Right, and then you can pull in all your editorial and on top of that one, and then hopefully once we have that plus the X map, I don't know if there was one more thing, then hopefully we are ready.
We have Colin in line. Please go ahead, Colin.
Hi. I think in the interest of getting sort of feedback quickly, that I would certainly find it easiest if there was an updated draft submitted, which I can then comment on. And given that we know there are comments coming, there seems very little point issuing a working group last call on something we know is going to change. But if we could get the pull requests merged and a draft submitted, then as I said, I'll comment within a week or so.
Chris, my suggestion is to submit the new version now with this pull request and the meet security, because it makes it easier for people to read. And then there will be an additional version with the rest, but very soon. But that then people can read the draft. We have the text in a draft, and it's
okay. So just to paraphrase, make sure I have the timeline right. Like, this week we take the PRs that are basically we've agreed to merge, and we hit merge on them and submit a new version out. But that's basically it, and that goes out like, I don't know, you can do it in 10 minutes, and then and Colin can start reviewing that. It's good. And then
maybe he wants to make a pull request on that if he finds some issues. Then it's easier for him also to.
Of course, it's easier. And then you work along with the editorial stuff, and we get and then sometime soon, but unspecified soon.
Very soon.
Very soon. Then we get the editorial comments in, and we have something that we believe is ready for our working group last call. Yes. Is that right? Sounds great. Anything sounds great. Anything that looks like forward progress sounds great. Okay, that's the end of my slides. That's it. So.
I guess the Bruce.
Thank you. I think we are, with that, 15 minutes ahead of time. So not seeing Adam in the room.
Well, yeah, you can see an offer.
No, probably not. Which means that we would have the possibility to take.
I think we should present IETF and I know Adam would be okay with the working group consensus here. It's okay.
Okay, you're welcome.
Yeah. How can you send the details server hello?
But I mean, we have time, right? We have an hour left still.
So
and Ben, you're saying that Adam is going to be here at 2:30?
Well,
okay, because if that's the case, I mean, we do have two presentations, and I think if he's here at 2:30, we will have half an hour. And at least based on the times that you guys gave us, you should have enough then to do both in half an hour, if you really want Adam here.
Receive media packets.
Receive
once we have
yes, like the allow unverified media thing has to also
let's start.
Seems like say that you can send.
Okay.
Where you remote sides.
Well, we might as well take the presentations first, that we don't need Adam for it, all right? We're not concerned right now.
Thank you.
So the only reason I would want to start on this because this has a dependency on JSF, and if it's this, slide deck does not get completed because of the time shortage, then that would also slow JSIP. So I don't want to hold JSIP because of this draft.
Okay, so you're not sure 15 minutes is enough, is what you're saying?
Yes.
All right.
Cool. So this is the ICP STP draft version 12. This next slide. So this slide, this version has most of the comments from Adam implemented. There are a few which needed clarification. So those are on the mailing list and awaiting response. And there are some open issues that Adam raised that I would want to kind of get an answer from the working group today.
I don't see how it's possible.
The first one is the issue here is how do we handle signaling protocol other than SIP in the ICP STP? So because today the current draft talks about SIP and it does not worry about say WebRTC or any other signaling protocol. So Adam's point was, should we extend the draft to deal with WebRTC, or should we go with something like what SIP did, where you have a draft that talks about STP, which is the ICE STP draft. It does not talk about SIP or anything, and create another draft that copies the SIP part into the ICE SIP draft. So that way, this draft would have one version that talks about STP when used with ICE, and another draft that talks about SIP. And tomorrow, when we come up with WebRTC, someone can just write ICE WebRTC draft if required. Our other proposal is that it does not matter, just keep the draft same. So tomorrow, whenever someone defines WebRTC, they can refer to individual sections in this draft. So I have no preference.
Krista, I don't think there. I was going to write. This was on the list. I don't think there's too much SIP in this document to begin with. I mean,
Yeah.
SIP specific. I mean, you talk about forking and things like that.
Yes.
But I think that can be, put in one section, SIP considerations or whatever, and then you put all the SIP specific, and the rest of the document is basically offer answer or STP.
Yeah.
I don't think we need to talk about non-offer answer. I mean, JSIP is offer answer too, or at least base, but descriptive STPs and those kind of things, I don't think we need to cover.
So, Krishna, the question would be, so if you put a SIP consideration section, so would we also need WebRTC consideration section? That's the question. Okay, so this would be the same.
Maybe, I mean, if there are some deviations, I can't think of any now, but maybe, but in that case, I think the main, I mean, the umbrella of this document is the STP, and then we put these consideration sections for whatever deviations there are. But I think it's good to have it clear that this is an STP document, so we don't kind of mix everything together.
Sure.
So that's why I like this consideration section. So
it makes sense.
Because then people see, I'm doing SIP, what do I need to know in addition to the document in general?
Sure. So one thing to go along with that, this draft, the title says that it's for using SIP. So probably we can change that to be more generic and have the SIP consideration section. Sure.
I mean, it seems like this is mostly essentially 3264 issues, not 3261 issues. I don't think there's anything that's 3261 style. Well, forking is 3264. I think so. It describes how, I mean, the offer answer draft describes how it works with forking, I think.
Yeah, it's like you need to send it.
Yeah. So I mean, I would say maybe STP offer answer and ICE or something like that is the title. But
yeah, sounds good.
Yeah. But keep the draft name the same, otherwise it's confusing.
Sure. So for the note takers, it's like we will be changing the draft name to be generic, and we'll have a SIP consideration section. So that way the draft is more of ICE with STP, but we'll have a SIP consideration section there. Okay.
It means in that context, each one.
Okay, this is not specific to the ICP STP. It applies to the ICE BIS as well. So the ICE BIS obsoletes 50 to 45, and ICP STP also obsoletes 50 to 45. So Adam's question was, what are we doing with 6544, which depends the ICE TCP, which depends on ICE today. So his point is it's in limbo. We are not even talking about it, how the new ICE would impact it. My proposal is that proposal one, we are not doing anything with respect to 6454, and we bring in ICE TCP candidates into the ICE STP draft, the current draft, because it talks only about UDP today. So the other two proposals that came was we create 6544 BIS and update it to refer to ICE BIS and ICE SIP STP for the relevant pieces, or we bring in 6544 piece into ICE and ICP-STP, I would think that's more work, more time, and we don't need to do that. So those are the three options we have on table.
Christer, there's not really any text. Is the only change that we would need to do in 6544 is to change the reference?
Yeah.
Then I think the fourth option would be that within your document we basically update 6544, and the only thing we say is that, you know, currently it references the RFC 5445, and now it references your draft. Isn't that?
I don't think you need for that. Yeah, I think, I think there's generally a understanding that if, you know, document 1 references document 2, and document 2 is replaced with 2 bis, then, you know, assuming that there's, you know, that it applies more or less the same. I mean, if somebody wanted to do a non-SDP based ICE TCP like ICE-BIS does ICE-UDP, that we have to figure that out, but that's not, I mean, and that's maybe something to be done in the future, but it's not critical path right up there.
Okay.
I'm going to say the same thing. I mean, all the time when we have, you know, TLS 1.2 obsoletes TLS 1.1, we don't try and fix the references in every document that ever referred to TLS 1.1. It's perfectly reasonable for it to point at a document that's obsolete. It doesn't disappear. Okay. It's still there. It's still an RFC number.
Sure.
And you can look that it's been obsoleted by something new. So I don't know that you need to do anything here, I think.
So in that case, it would be more of the option 1 that we have here. Okay. Yep. Oh, but we need to add ICE TCP candidates here. You're just saying, okay. Okay. We'll remove that one. Cool.
I'm proposing option 0. Do nothing.
Do nothing. Okay. Sure. Next one. So this is what I didn't understand completely what Adam meant, and this is where I wanted Adam to be in the room to explain what his issue was. Like, we have these ICE options. His point was, I copied his text directly here, but it was more on feature support versus feature activation and for ICE options. So he had the history from SIP options where he said, unless we define clearly what a feature support and what a feature activation means, we might end up being having implementations that, you know, some support but does not activate, and it might end negotiation failures. So either we need to clearly define what the differences between both and come up with a new framework, like formal syntax for how do you differentiate between an activation versus support. So this requires more work to be done, but this has already been there in the 50-45 when we split into ICP-STP. I'm not sure if this is causing any problem for any implementations today. So my proposal is, again, first option would be no op. If not, what do we need to do here?
Yes, Chris. I mean, this is an old issue that we have discussed in SIP, and it comes up every now and then. For example, when you include a SIP option tag, what does it really mean? I mean, obviously, it means that you support something, but does it also mean that you're going to use it? Yeah. In my opinion, if you indicate ICE options, I think that means, obviously, if the other one supports it, that means that you are also going to use it.
Okay.
You know, I support this, and if I can, I will use it.
Sure.
I think that's, but I agree, we should really specify that so no one comes after and say, yeah, but I do support it, but that doesn't mean I have to use it. We should really say that, yes, if you support it and we can use it, then we will use it, must use it.
Okay, so just a clarification on that front. Okay.
Yeah, Jonathan, I mean, I guess my point is that if some option needs some more negotiation than that, then it needs additional attributes of whatever flavor, not just which it has to define, not just having an option.
Sorry, I mixed up. I was thinking about the this too. What you say, you should say that anyone who defines this SIP option needs to specify what it really means. Then, if I define ICE options X, I need to specify what it means when I include that in my message.
Okay. So since we define ICE2 option, so are we saying for ICE2 that if I include it in my offer and the other endpoint agrees that to do ICE2, then I'll be using ICE2? Is it okay to say for at least ICE2 option?
My first suggestion was that we have for ICE option a generic rule, but I mean, if people think now a specific ICE option should be able to have different, then that's fine. But then we need to specify that whoever defines an ICE options need to define if I include this, does it only mean support? Does it only mean support and use? And if it only means support, how do we then negotiate the usage? I mean, it needs to be clear, because we've had problems with that in SIP, and I think we should try to avoid those problems.
So in that case, are we tending towards defining a formal syntax for that now, generically for all DICE options? Or
So Martin Thompson, I think the right way to think of this is, if the offerer includes the option, that means they're willing to use it.
Mhm.
If the answerer also includes the option, it means they're using it. And I know this is a little bit more strict than what Krista has just said, but that means you're using the option. Now, using the option might mean there's some further negotiation that goes on, but you're using the option.
Okay, sure.
Does that make sense? I think writing that down would help a lot.
Sure, sounds good. Okay.
And yes, SIP is a little bit of a mess, yeah.
Okay. We have a comment from the queue. Roman, go
Yes.
ahead, please.
My comment was, should we set the YANA registry for SIP options, which will define, which will basically put some sort of registration where they are defined and what, how they negotiated? Because right now it's kind of hanging out there.
For ICE options, yes, we do have registry. Yeah, there's not much in it, but I think we do have.
So Roman, is your suggestion that we include in the registration policy for the registry that every single entry must define what it means to use?
Yes, exactly.
The option. Great. That's called a spec. Yeah, that's good.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think they should be specification required, but I'm not. It sounded like you were saying we should put the whole specification in the registry, which I don't think is a good plan.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, sure. Specification. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, it's not that I want to put the whole, I just basically want to have a minimum requirement of what it means to define ICE option, and it basically should define how it's negotiated. It's so that's, and again, we can either put it in the YANA registry, or we can specify it that it needs to, if it's defined, it needs to define this particular field, and it's, how exactly it's negotiated, so it doesn't need to be hunted through. And be uncertain as it is right now.
So Ronnie, on the notes, you need to include that the option should be specification required for registry. Okay, next steps. I think this is the last slide. The next step is that Roman. I'm waiting on Roman to provide the text for the transport and default candidates. Because the current version of the ICP STP says that once you need to wait till the nomination completes, and then you would send the updated offer and answer. I think for SCTP SDP draft, like they changed that when under ICE you can keep sending the updated offers, but once nomination completes, you need to use the default candidate. That can change even if the transport changes. The default candidate that we use might remain same. So Roman has volunteered to provide some text on it. So wait on that. Once we get the text, merge it in, and I close the open issues from today. Like it looks like a small change compared to what I thought it was. So that's where we are. I think we have Roman. Yeah.
No, I agree with this.
Christian.
Oh, sorry.
So a couple of issues here. Just to be to understand. First of all, we need to close the issue from the previous meeting about different transports for offer and answer in transport line and what goes in there. The second issue are actually updated offers answers while ICE nomination process is still in progress. And the third one is to basically be specific on what is being sent after ICE nomination process is done and what goes into the M line and basically candidates. So those are three things that, from what I understand, needs to be covered. There is actually a related issue to that is the issue of ICE mismatch. And what I wanted to propose is that for ICE mismatch, it needs to be either one of the candidates or the 000 address. So that like if you receive something in the M line with 000 address, which what WebRTC is already doing, it doesn't trigger ICE mismatch for not matching any of the candidates. And if you get an offer with the default candidate transport way, which you don't support, you respond with the same transport, but you put 000 in the M line. Then you can, so those, but I will put the pull request with all of that.
Sure. So Roman, just to confirm, so you'll be having pull requests for all the
all of those three, all those things, because I think they're related, and you can't kind of address one without the other.
Sure. Thanks.
John, thanks. I mean, I'm just actually sort of questioning Roman. So it sounded like you said that if you get a transport you don't support, if you get a transport you don't understand, you put an IPv4, you put an invalid IPv4 address in, which doesn't seem to make a lot of sense. You know, like I don't speak IPv6, so I'm going to give you I'm going to say, you know, C equals I on IPv6 0.0.0.0.0, which doesn't make a lot of sense to me. I mean, maybe we need some other, you know, generic, you know, invalid address, you know, for any, you know, for anything like dash or something. But
Krista, I think these issues, I had slides of this in Seoul.
Yeah.
And we did agree on all the issues. We had an agreement. So I encourage people to go and look at the minutes, and if they don't agree to the minutes or the decisions, then they should be raised. The thing I first came here to say was that I agree with this. Whenever you send an offer, the M line should reflect the currently used candidate.
Yeah.
So that's a little bit, because when we talked about the first presentation today about subsequent offers, someone said that JSEP says, you in all subsequent offers, just put whatever you had in the first one. Don't change anything. So this is a little different than this, because we actually say that whenever you send a new offer, if you have changed the transport, then the M line should reflect that. So.
Okay.
Roman?
Yep. Just to clarify exactly what we're saying is, while ICE nomination process is in progress, we keep saying we keep sending the same the offer with the same default candidate. Once ICE nomination process is done, you actually send offer with the candidate which is nominated, the one that you are using. So that's that's the exact spec of what at least we proposed. Regarding the offer answer, you send an offer with your default candidate, but when the answer is being generated, let's say you send an offer with TCP or AVP RTP, and the answering endpoint does not support TCP RTP AVP. It includes no TCP candidates. So the current what I am proposing is the answer, the M line should still include TCP RTP AVP, same transport as in the offer, to continue to operate according to what SDP currently offer answer currently proposes, which proposes the same transport. But since there is no candidate which matches that transport, put a fake IP address, put a fake address in there. Currently, WebRTC is using invalid IPv4 address. If somebody thinks there is something better which goes in there, again, I'll propose the pull request, and you can comment on that, and we can change it. But just keep in mind that this will also probably affect WebRTC or RTC Web on what they're using for the in the situations when M line does not match any of the candidates.
So Roman, when do you think that you can have that pull request ready?
Of next week. I was planning to do it last week, but kind of ran out of time. So within the next few days.
Thanks, Roman. So yeah, I think the next steps would be merge that pull request and get the reviews, and I will close the other issues that we had today. And I'll make sure that I'll talk to Adam as well once on the outcomes. He's happy with it. Yeah. Thanks.
So we have Adam's agenda item, we have Bernard, and we have Martin. And I believe Bernard would be next, not having Adam in the room.
Okay, so this is about a liaison request from the W3C WebRTC working group relating to RFC 4572 update and also RFC 4572 because the text has not changed between them. Next. So what we're asking here is to try to get a consensus of the MMUSIC working group relating to interpretation of some specific text, which I'll show you in section 6.2. It's relevant to an open issue in the WebRTC spec, and we did post to the MMUSIC list, and I'll summarize the discussion so far from the list. Next. Okay, so here is a specific text in section 6.2 of 4572 update, and what it's talking about here is the, well, there's a must not specifically about data transmitted over the TLS or DTLS connection. And it's saying it must not assume that this data is valid until it's received a matching fingerprint in an SDP answer. So it is a must not. So there was obviously a strong feeling about it to put the must not and not a should not in there. And then the question is, what exactly does this mean? And it says must not assume the data is valid. So, and then it says if the fingerprint once it arrives doesn't match, the server endpoint must terminate the media connection. But then the question is what happens before that? So I will get to the, just next slide is the specific questions. And the first one's about the data channel. May the data we receive be provided to the application, and second one is may received media be played out. Those are the two questions we're asking.
So can you just go back to the previous?
Sure.
Or, well, I mean, yeah,
this is the text.
Tell me when it's a good point to discuss, I guess. Is the question.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this is the text, and those are the questions about the text. And we'll get to some of the discussion in a bit. So go about 2 slides. Yeah, so here's the discussion on the list about the 2 questions so far, and people can correct or expand upon their comments. So first question is about the data provided to the app, so in the data channel. So Martin's answer was, no, you can't provide it to the app, but holding the data should be fine, and feel free to expand upon that, Martin. Ecker then said, might be better to discard the data channel, but not sure why it would be necessary, so not required to discard it. And then Inaki said discarding the data channel data would be catastrophic, so don't do that. So so I'm trying to separate the two things because they're somewhat different in their considerations. And then the second one, go to the next slide. So this is the discussion on the received media. Here there was a lot of different opinions. So Martin said he was of 2 minds, could make the origin purity, but also can isolate the media. The odds of the attack would seem to be low, kind of going through all the stuff you got to do to kind of force it through there. Roman said the data should be received, decoded, and discarded. It's kind of interesting. You decoded and you discarded. And then Ecker said, ought to be safe to hold anything you receive prior to getting the fingerprint. And then Colin said it was a policy question at the application layer. So I think we've pretty much got every possible opinion for that particular question. So now we can open the line and get even more opinions. But my goal being here is to try to get a consensus out of all this. So, but anyway, go ahead. Good luck with that. Okay.
Can we go back to the actual text on your first slide?
Sure.
I think this text is perfect. I think it exactly sums up the issue, which is, and let's think about how we deal with all security failures. Like when you get a certificate that doesn't validate on your web browser, the browser says, Are you sure you really want to screw yourself? And you're like, yes, fire that gun into my foot now, and off you go, you carry on. And there's good reasons for that. It's exactly the right thing to do in many cases. But which cases it's the right thing to do in is highly dependent on understanding what you're going to do with this data afterwards. If your point of this data was, purely to capture it to use up bandwidth or something, I don't know, maybe be right. If you were going to buffer it and save it for later. I think it depends. I think that we need to remember what this fingerprint, what not having the fingerprint means. Doesn't mean the data is not valid. It means you just don't know who it came from, right? That's all it means. So what we're saying here is you must not assume that it is valid until you get a fingerprint. It might be coming from an attacker. It might have been corrupted by a network intermediary along their way. There's many things that's happened. And then once the fingerprint has arrived, if it doesn't match, then we throw this out, okay? But what you do with those data between those two cases is explicitly left exactly out of scope for this. It is up to the application using it, and that's where my policy is. And by the way, application using it, I don't think is the web browser sitting on top of it. I think it is the JavaScript application running in the WebRTC context. Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
Yep. So Martin Thompson, I think the concern here was when you get this stuff and you know it's bad, or you don't know it's bad until the point that you know that it's good. And so the play out thing is an interesting one. That's why I sort of hedged on the play out one, because you can actually send that media some places without actually the application getting to see it. The
Right.
user gets to see it though, and that's a concern, right? So it could be spoofed or from someone that's managed to hijack the connection somehow. Seems unlikely, as I said. Yeah, I think Colin's largely right here.
Okay.
But once you do know, you can do something with it, and I think Eka's point was you can hold it, and that's true. You can hold this stuff. At some point, you might want to give up on that, but you can hold it, and then if the certificate turns out to be good later on, then you can play it out. And it's kind of interesting for things like video, where you might be receiving an iframe, and you only get just a little bit of the iframe, but asking for an RTX on that would be kind of wasteful. So shove it in a buffer. Chances are you're going to be able to finish the handshake pretty soon and work out the certificate's good. So then you're good to go.
Mozanetti, I think Colin and Eka are both right. Colin's right that this is the right kind of text because you don't know exactly what the application wants to do. But I think Eka is going even further and saying that buffering is clearly a safe operation. I would even go further and caution that anything beyond buffering is most likely not a safe operation. There may be some applications that think they can take the risk, but for most applications, it would be a bad decision. And this is not just for playout. This is not just rendering the wrong thing. This is a serious attack for decoding. And when we integrated OpenH264 into Firefox, we found a ton of decoder vulnerabilities that had to be fixed before we could go out. And this is probably not all things are closed. And that's a typical thing with media. It's very complex. Decoding is notoriously complex to get done right and securely because it severely impacts performance if you do a lot of range checks and look for a lot of invalidities in the data. So I would caution that any application that thinks it can do something with the data other than buffering is probably opening up security vulnerabilities that we don't want.
Hi, Randall Jessup, Mozilla. I generally agree with Cullen here. In fact, I agree with a lot of people. I agree with Cullen. I agree with Eka that you can certainly hold this, and that's probably the safest solution to do. But I think I'm also believe that letting the application have some control over what happens here is a good idea. What Cullen said, the application can put a big banner over it saying "Warning, unverified," or it could sit there and decode it but not show it unless the user asks to see it, or you could hold it. All those are options, and depending on the security context, they all may or may not make sense. Mo is correct that there are some security issues here. They're bigger with video than others, but I'm not certain that that's should drive us to prohibit the processing of unverified data. There's lots of cases where unverified data will get processed anyways. So I agree this text is good, and I think we should allow as Colin said, we should allow the browser or the application to make further decisions about what to do with it.
Krista, yeah, I also had some comment on the list. First of all, I think my question was really if this is a real life problem, because for example, if you're using ICE, I think before you send any media at all, you're going to do all the ICE procedures, and I think you should have the ICE procedures done in both directions before anyone starts sending any media, because I think it's strange that you start sending me a media, but I can't send you any media because my ICE is not done yet. So I think they should do
Well,
ICE.
I think it was noted on the list that as soon as you get a response to your check, you can send. So
Yes, you can send, but I think you should. My opinion is you shouldn't send until you know that you can also receive. And but that's just. Okay. Okay, no, well, but then, okay, but I also say just wait for a while before you start sending them. There's always a risk that the SDP answer is going to get stuck somewhere and never arrive, and of course this can happen. But then I also, and then you mentioned the data channel. For example, the data channel, you're going to have to do the SCTP association establishment also before you can start sending any data on that. So I don't know if that's really I don't know how long that's going to take, but it will take a while to do that also, I assume.
We'll go to the queue again. Peter?
Yeah, so sorry for bringing this up late, but Taylor and I were going through our code and seeing how this might be implemented, and I think it's impossible, because I think you cannot complete the details handshake until you have sent an ICE connectivity check and received a response, which means that you can't complete the details handshake until you have the remote ICE UFRAG and password.
Yeah.
Which means you can't receive media until you've also got the remote fingerprint. Assuming you get the remote fingerprint and the remote ICE UFRAG and password at the same time. If you could receive the remote ICE UFRAG and password at a different time, then you receive the remote fingerprint, then you could receive media before the fingerprint, but not if they're coming together.
Yeah, I think we have talked about that, Peter, because of the potential. If you don't wait till you get the UFRAG, you might get confused about who's controlling and controlled.
No, you can't even send a connectivity check, which means you can't receive a response, which means you can't send the server hello to complete the details handshake.
Right. So this goes back to, so the discussion we're moving into here is totally out of scope for what we're talking about with this document, right? But it is based on the assumption of whether you will get the ICE information at the same time you get the fingerprint that ends up getting used. And that's the part where this comes apart. We've discussed this many times. I don't want to do it again here. The thing I actually came to the mic to talk about was the TCP case. Imagine with this is often if people are doing like a connection-oriented protocol, actually not buffering almost always is going to cause stuff to fail. Like if you don't at least buffer and store, you're probably, if you discard something off the front of a TCP stream, you will almost inevitably mess up whatever protocol was running over that TCP stream. So I think there's some cases where discarding is just downright harmful for connections. Yeah, not connection-oriented protocols. Yeah.
Yeah, you could drop it at the TCP level. So John Pathetic. So I think given Peter's comments, I think the answer to the liaison statement is this can't happen for WebRTC. It's possible. I think we've determined it could be a problem in other scenarios, but I think for JSEP as specified, I don't think this can happen.
I do.
How?
I have suggested the W3C. I would write up a call flow that showed that, but it happens when you have a gateway involved that is still trying to do some endpoint end-to-end DTLS SRTP, but is mapping between a SIP endpoint and a non-SIP endpoint. And the reason it comes up is when that gateway connects to the 1-800-GO-FedEx, which plays early. And that was Christopher's point. People just shouldn't start playing media before an answer is confirmed. That's totally true. But to try and make SIP beat H323 in the late 90s, we told people explicitly to do that. And some sites start playing it in the ringback tone, right? And so it becomes very hard to map. So that's the case where it can occur. Now, I'm not disagreeing with the statements that people made about you do need the connectivity checks before you can send things.
That's what I mean. So you have to have done the kind of, before you can get any media in, WebRTC, you have to have done both connectivity checks and DTLS handshake.
Mhm.
No. Well, no, in order for a DTLS handshake to complete, there have to have been connectivity checks in both directions.
From the ports, the media is flowing on.
Right.
Not necessarily to the same endpoint on the same DTLS connection. Let me ask. Have you thought about the use case carefully where you have a translator that is a gateway where the media flows through that, but the DTLS is end to end? Because that's the case where it happens. So if you're sure you got it figured out for that case, I'm good with you. But I don't think you've thought about it.
So we're going to cut the line on this one, by the way. We got, all right, Peter snuck in there. We'll take him as well. Roman, go ahead.
Yeah, first of all, I wanted to mention ICE Lite, which is supported, which kind of breaks this whole handshakes need to be completed in both directions. It can receive an offer and send stuff to the opposite end. We'll start sending a DTLS handshake. So that's kind of one option. The second option is, the second thing, I think when we did the DTLS document, the main thing that we mentioned was that the endpoint should be prepared to process the client hello. When it offers active passive, it should be prepared to process client hello. Don't discard it, even though you did not receive the answer. Whether it should send the response, the server hello, is actually something which is probably underspecified. And we can probably, and it's possible to adjust that. So that's all I want to say.
All right. Okay, so what is the process by which we can get a consensus answer? Okay, Peter.
Okay. Hopefully Peter can answer that for us.
Well, I'm not objecting to this existing for cases outside of ICE plus DTLS. I mean, if ICE is not involved, then what I was saying before isn't relevant. And we can discuss whether this is possible or not in the context of WebRTC in a different working group, but I do think that in the case where we're using ICE and DTLS, this is impossible. So for those, especially Colin, who want this to be used in that context, I think we're kind of wasting our time. But I'm not objecting to this going into the text in a case that doesn't involve ICE.
Peter, I agree with you. It's up to me to show how that case would be used and why it'd be relevant, and for like WebRTC to decide what they want to do with it. But for browsers, but I mean, I think, which is a sort of, I mean, even if it's possible, you guys might decide like it's too weird a case for you to bother supporting, so who cares, right? That's perfectly reasonable to decide. But I think it's the question of what does this text here mean, which was what the liaison was about. I suspect that we, you know, we had quite a few people speak to a wide range of options are reasonable and they should be done with sufficient caution. I don't know. What Martin, what do you want? I don't want to summarize.
Yeah, so Martin Thompson, I think we were disagreeing about the premise, I think, to some extent, but no one was really disagreeing that with the text as was in the document, and we were just kind of each exploring a different aspect of the consequences of that. I don't think we were fundamentally disagreeing about any of this.
So can you summarize what we were not disagreeing about?
When you get packets you don't know where they're from yet, you don't use them until you know.
So let's try to answer it specifically as it relates to the two questions that we have up here.
So I think that what I'm saying, I think quite a few people said were the answers to these questions, and I'll throw this as a straw man. People can confirm or deny. Our thing is, you know, given the text that's in this draft, or the text in this working group in this draft, we're saying
it's an RFC at this point.
RFC, yeah, sorry. The RFC says Yes, you can use that data. It doesn't say you should use that data or you shouldn't use that data. It says you can use that data. And roll back to it. Yes, of course. Yes, it must not be regarded as valid. It doesn't say it must be discarded. It explicitly says, and of course it's not, you can't regard it as valid. We'd all agree on that, right? Yet we all didn't think, say it had to be discarded in all cases either. So clearly we think it's all right to process and use valid data, and that when that's wise, or invalid data, and when that's wise to do, depends on the context, and is not something this draft takes
For question one, we're asking not whether you discard it, because I think we have agreement that you shouldn't throw away the data channel data, but whether it's provided to the app. Like in the data channel API, can you provide it to the app before it's verified?
And Bernard, I would suggest that this is actually a question for the W3C to make, because they're in the position to understand this more concretely. And the answer that I would say is, if you are putting invalid information into an origin, you've made a big mistake. But in the case that Cullen's talking about, it may be possible to play back the media, for instance, without it actually hitting the origin. I'm in two minds about whether I would support a patch that actually did that in Firefox. I probably would tell whoever did that to go and have a good hard look at themselves. And
all right, so I think we're going to have to continue this one on the mailing list. Doesn't look like we're going to converge on anything in the next 2 minutes. We still have two potentially additional items on the agenda. Adam is here now. Adam, if you're ready, let's move ahead to yours.
Hello. Okay, we're in a hurry. Let's go into the second slide. We are almost done with RID. Sorry? But very nice. So during the Shepherd review, one question came up that we. This button here. There we go. One question came up, actually several questions came up, but I was able to deal with all of them except one that really should be put in front of the working group here. So in the current text, the way things are set up, I send an offer and it has some restrictions in it, goes to the answer, and he sends an answer back to me, and he's allowed to crank those restrictions even further down. There's text in there right now that says that if I, as the offerer, cannot honor those modifications, then I just discard the RID line. Basically, I say, we're not doing restrictions on this one because I can't do what you asked me to do. And that's kind of the way that a lot of the offer-answer exchange works, except for all of the situations, the other party knows that you're about to do this. In this particular case, the answer doesn't know that there's a problem. He doesn't know that I said, never mind. And there were some concerns that this might cause some issues. I think the next slide I basically talked through three possible ways to approach this. One is to keep this as is. I mean, the restriction failed to be negotiated. These, I mean, they have a feeling of being kind of advisory in the first place, because the way that attributes work, it's like, I'll send them. If you don't understand them, then the session gets set up anyway. And that's kind of the way that this whole mechanism was intended to work in the first place. And that was the logic that led us to the text that we currently have. Now, thinking through the way that all of this works, really, I've said, here's a stream, I'm going to constrain it down, here, it's big, I'm going to constrain it down to medium, and then I send it to you, and you say, I don't want it medium, I want it small. It seems a little counterintuitive that I turn around and say, well, never mind, it's huge now. So I think that it would be sensible to change this to say, well, if you can't honor the more constrained constraint, then you do what you said you were going to do in the first place. It just seems a little more intuitive. So I think we could change the text so it says this, and we have pretty minor change in what's in there currently. The third option would be to actually make certain the other party was aware this situation had arisen. So this would almost certainly require some additional offer-answer exchange, whereby I get the answer and say, wait a second, I can't do this, so I have to tell him about it. And we'd have to develop additional mechanism to say, I'm
I'm now constraining it in this way, and you're not allowed to constrain it any further because I can't do anything else. This is a non-trivial additional amount of mechanism, and because of the fact that, like I said in the first place, these are kind of advisory, and the session gets set up, and even if these things aren't honored, that seems like overkill to me. So, next slide. My proposal then is option 2, where we just clarify that the original constraint still stands and don't really bother informing the other party about it. Suhas.
Yeah, Suhas. I think the solution should be option 1, because this is very typical to what would happen in 3264. Say I do an FMTP. I think this as an FMTP, right? I said in my ST64, these are my boundaries that I could support. And the other person can come back and say, I cannot support the big boundary, but I can support some subset of it. And you go with the subset of it. Because the person who is offering is saying, I can do anything in that range. So he cannot come back and say, since you're asking for less than what I said, I cannot do it. You should be able to do it. So that's an understanding.
So what you've described is option 2, by the way.
No, option 1.
No, option 1 is basically if I were to come in and say, okay, here's an H.264 stream.
Yeah.
And this one I plan to send at only 640, right?
Yes.
And then you as the answer say, oh, can you send that at 240 instead?
Yeah, I will send
right.
it to
I'm not going to turn around and say, oh, I can't do that, so here's 1080p.
Yeah, so I think it's that I say I'll do 640. You come back and say you can do only 240.
Right.
I will do 240 for you, because when I said I will do.
I'm sorry, I should clarify, this is in the sending direction, right? So if I say I can send you 640 and you say I want 240, I'm not going to turn around and start sending you 1080p because I can't do something that small. It would be vaguely nonsensical.
Yeah, I think the answer is you would do what the receiver wants here. That's what I'm trying to say. Yeah, you must support the receiver because you gave the receiver a range, and the receiver picks an option in that range, and you say, okay, I'll accept your option that you picked. So you're going with the receiver. That's how the 3264 is designed to work, right? With say FMTP.
But this is not FMTP. Comprehension is not mandatory for this. One of the fundamental precepts of RIT is if I'm sending these things and the remote party has no idea what they mean, the call should still be set up.
Mo, just to clarify, I think Suhas is arguing for an option 4 that's when you send a RID restriction in your offer, you must support any offering that restriction means also offering any restriction lower than that. I think that's what he's arguing for as an option 4.
I don't think that's technically possible with every video codec, and I suspect that's what he's about to tell us.
First of all, video codec according to us, it's the receiver who's supposed to get everything that you'll send in. It's not the sender that needs to do something. It's the receiver must support everything. That's video codec. Now, I think that the right way about it is to have option 2, but to clarify also that if the receiver, the answerer, does not want to, if the answer provides something that is lower than current, and the offerer, and he's not willing to get what the answerer proposed, he should not even ask for it because he may be rejected because he doesn't know. Why should he ask for?
Sure, that's a decision that he could make at an application level. I don't think we need to have standards language around it. I mean, that's a perfectly sensible reaction.
Because it makes sense to do it this way, because if he's not sure if the other side can send him, he can request it, but it's optional to request it. He's willing to receive also the other codec or the other restriction. And like I said, video codec, at least it has nothing to do with the network, because some of the issues are not based on the codec, what the codec can do, but can be other issues. But at least in terms of the codec, he's supposed to be able to decode anything he gets between, which is specified in the level.
Okay.
Okay. So yeah, Jonathan Lennox. I mean, so for option 3 would have to be something like saying, I support. I support 1080p, but only down to 640, and below that, just, reject this SEM line. That's would have to be the semantic or something like that, right?
Right, and so that one of the things that made this, I'm not going to say easy, but achievable, was the fact that we limited what we were talking about to constraints, not minima or some range.
Yeah, I might say that, sort of say that, if you get a thing you can't satisfy, just don't send anything. And maybe send a reoffer with it, saying, receive only or inactive or something. It's three.
It's not
But it's three except without the explaining what the restriction is. It's just.
right. I mean, so what he's suggesting is that it's basically it's a variation on this, whereby if I receive a RID line in response that is constraining things further than I can honor, then I treat that the same as them setting the port to 0.
Setting it to receive only or whatever. The M line.
Or setting the direction to receive only. It's basically I'm gonna knock off the transmit bit for the direction.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's not bad, except for he still doesn't the answerer still does not know whether this is about to happen. They might, I'm not going to send you a stream, and you're going to have to deduce from the absence of media that I can't do what you asked.
That's why you're saying which the offer tells the answer. Basically, then send a reoffer saying, mark this one, receive only or whatever. Because the point being that if I said, no, I really don't want anything bigger than 240p, because you'll blow out my buffers or whatever, and I start getting a 640p stream, I'm going to be unhappy.
That's vaguely sensible. I'm trying to figure out. So what we would say then is don't send the stream, but send a reoffer.
No, I think 3 is intractable because remember where RID comes from. RID comes from a bunch of streams happening usually. You have simulcast, probably bundled too. So you have a bunch of streams. There's really no good SDP way to say, I'm going to turn something off. You can't turn off the whole inline, right? There's dozens of flows maybe on here. So there's no really good way to do 3. Really all you can do is silently not send media on that RID, or send media on the RID anyway, which doesn't meet the constraint. That's really all you can do because there's not any other knobs in SDP that let you say, well, I'm not really going to do this one little substream.
From the simulcast group, that's true.
Which you can't specify that in RID because that's a simulcast thing.
Yeah.
I think that the best way to go is go with 1, and if there's application level logic that can just disable the stream and give some kind of SDP notification of it, fine. But if there's not, then you can leave it as application decision whether to transmit something without the restriction or not transmit anything at all, but not really have a way to signal that in SDP.
Can you send a buy or something like that so that
like an RTCP buy?
This stream was 0 length. Right. Yeah, but you just
right. No, what he's saying is basically send an RTCP packet with a buy and the corresponding
the corresponding RID and
No, there's not an SRC, but there's a corresponding RID. You can put that RID in the buy. No, you can't. I thought you could stack these. No. Okay.
Yeah.
You can have multiple. You can have multiple elements.
You could do that. You could do that, but buying that SSRC does not mean I'm buying all RIDs that could be used with that number. It just means I'm just buying that one SSRC. Another SSRC could pop up immediately afterwards and use the same RID. That's valid RTP, right?
Okay. Yeah. Okay, so what I'm hearing is support for basically keeping the mechanism as is and adding some explanatory text that if your application needs to take additional action so that things don't blow off the rails, do so. Does anyone who understands this have the time to sort of craft that 1 paragraph warning?
And maybe one more advisory, like informational note saying when you offer a restriction, you should also be able to honor restrictions lower than that in the answer, just to let people know that expect something to come back that may be lower and try to honor that as well.
Right, but that's a should thing, right? It very well maybe the controls into your codec don't allow you to turn it down past a certain level. But so, do you understand this well enough? You think you could write the paragraph? Okay, excellent. Thank you very much. We have volunteer from Mo to address this and otherwise keep the text as is. Excellent. Thank you very much.
All right, Martin, 5 minutes. Does that work? Okay. While the
Whoa.
slides are coming up,
This in 5 minutes.
Actually,
Everyone's seen this before, right?
hang on one sec, Martin. Before you get started, we need simulcast reviewers, by the way. We don't have that. So, you can all, start lining up here and volunteer. But we're not moving that draft forward with the current level of review that we have. So we need people to sign up for that. So with that, go ahead, Martin.
All right. Thank you. Next. There's an attack. It allows someone who is in a call with someone they expect to be to switch out someone else who might be in a call with that same person for them. It's details are in the draft, and people who haven't seen how this works, it's kind of boring. But the ultimate end result is that someone is talking to someone, but they believe they're talking to someone else, to the attacker. That's the basic premise here. But you have to be willing to conduct 2 concurrent calls with the same fingerprints, and there's a bunch of other constraints on this make it not particularly interesting. Next slide, please. The solution here is to bind the connection establishment, the TLS handshake, to the SDP in some way. And the obvious solution here is to use this DTLS ID attribute that we're adding in this document that's well past working group last call. And that attribute is supposed to be unique, and we've tweaked that up to the right sort of level of entropy to solve this problem. Everything's fine. The problem here is that we have both TLS and DTLS, and that attribute only applies to DTLS. It comes with a bunch of other baggage too. So this potentially affects this other draft here. Next, please. I've got some options to present to people, and we can talk about them. So option number 1 is we define another new attribute that we can use in the TLS side of things. So you now have an unambiguous identifier, one for DTLS and another one for TLS, and you put that identifier in the handshake and everything's fine. It does mean that you have 2 different things that basically have the same semantics, and you have to then recognize which protocol you're operating in and switch. It's a little bit kludgy. Option number 2 is we make the A equal DTLS ID more generic. Now, Roman pointed out the big flaw with this is that DTLS ID has a semantic, which is when it changes, you want a new connection. But we already have A equal connection for the TLS connection, so that's kind of ugly. And option number 3 is what I had in the original version of the document, which is find some other unique identifier in the SDP and use that. Jonathan.
So my objection to option 3 is that this jingle does do DTLS SRTP at the very least, and it doesn't have O equals lines. So
right. So that's a very good objection to the first one. Third one, sorry. The original solution I proposed, which was very hacky.
Just a quick question. This has nothing to do with something that you could fix with the consent refreshness. That's
no. This is something that requires the integrity check over the handshake to bind directly back to the SDP that you're talking about, so that you can't end up in a situation where you have a disagreement between the 2 endpoints about which SDP you're talking about.
Okay.
And furthermore, I think we need to go even finer than that and say the M line or the transport level that we're talking about. We both agree on that point, and that's the whole attack here.
We have a minute and a half left.
Fluffy.
So someone will complain 63 bits isn't enough, so just like X option 3 from that.
Right.
Can you say why there's any reason to have 2 identifier? If we go with the 2 identifiers, why are they any way different than 1? It seems like the same content always in both of them, or same semantics.
It's a random sequence of bits in both of them. The reason that having the 1 identifier is challenging is that it would have some additional semantics for DTLS that would not be present in TLS, because in TLS we have the A equal connection attribute that determines whether you want a new one or not.
Right, so it overlaps with an existing thing, but
there's a little bit of an overlap. Yeah. So
I'm voting 1.
You're voting 1? No, 3's gone.
So Haas, coming from the podcast coach here, I think option 1 or 2 both are fine. I would prefer option 2. Just have a clarification whenever using the AES code connection. You use AES code connection semantic to define the new connection, not this one. But this would be just an identifier. In DTLS case, it should be.
Yeah. So in Perk, it's a little bit ugly to have 2 different identifiers and have to switch them in and all those sorts of other things. So if people are okay with option 2, that means we're going to hit that document. Maybe. Yeah, it's like 4572 update just went out, and now it's going to it's straight back on the surgeon's table.
Well, Krista is running short of work.
Yeah,
here
I mean,
pretty
anyone
soon, so.
anyone who wants to get bundled ready, soon.
So I was going to suggest that I talk to you, Krista, and we sort out a plan for this one offline.
Yeah.
I just wanted this to be discussed here so that we had sort of a path forward. So thanks for the time.
We are at the top of the hour. Again, if we could get somebody to volunteer reviewing simulcast, we would really appreciate that. Let the chairs know. We simply cannot progress the draft without further review right now. So please come see us. Thank you. All right. Thanks, Colin. Anybody else? Bonnie, thank you.
I'm sharing the next thing in here, so I'm just throwing the stuff back. Right.